Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, Pam. And I'm so glad to have you here today, this evening. I believe we have some great guests. No, not I believe, I know we do. We've got some awesome guests. And in particular, how we're going to do the show this evening, we're going to split it up with two young people, one Gen Z, one millennial, discussing how they're helping their peers to get out the vote and all the other advocacy things that they're doing. And then on the second part of the show, I'm going to interview Cedric Herring, who is running for Wake County Sheriff. So it'll be a great show this evening. Just so that you know, this channel is literally all about voter education, advocacy, and social justice. And we'll mix it up with things in the culture as well. But in the meantime, with midterm elections pressing, we really want to talk about how we're going to get things done and make things happen. You will notice across the scroll on the screen, I've added my email address so that if you know of someone or if you yourself are running for office or have an interest in making commentary or what have you, to please email me and we can discuss it and make that happen. All right, great. So first, I'm going to pull up the two gentlemen and on the screen that I'm interviewing first. And then we're going to have some banter back and forth. Okay, so Greer Webb. Hey there, Greer.
Good evening. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. And I'm going to add Clay. There you go, Clay. Hey.
Hello, good evening.
Right.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, so I'm going to introduce you first, Greer. So Greer is a junior at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He is a Moorhead Kane Scholar. And I'm proud of you because I know that's tough to get that scholarship. Greer is quite remarkable of his generation. At the ripe old age of 17, he founded not one, but two nonprofits centered around the youth, North Carolina Town Hall and Young Americans Protest, also known as YAP. I'm fascinated to find out what that's about. He is a fierce advocate in gun violence prevention and police accountability legislation. Greer was selected as a 2020 Youth Voter Ambassador through Harvard's Graduate School of Education. He was appointed to the City of Raleigh's Police Advisory Board in 2020 and to Governor Roy Cooper's statewide crime commission. He is thus far the youngest to date that got inducted into the Wake County Public Schools Hall of Fame. He's a dedicated warrior for justice who cares deeply about bridging North Carolina's racial divide. And so I'm so proud of you guys. You give me hope, really. And I hope that our listeners that are in the audience and that listen to this show afterwards feel the same way. Because it's not often you hear a lot of good, positive things about African-American young men. And our second person of interest that we're going to introduce here is Clay DeSouza. Clay is the founder of his own firm of DeSouza Strategies. Clay is a political, hospitality, and research professional. He has a background in grassroots politics. He is well connected with seasoned political veterans from the White House to Capitol Hill and beyond. I always literally see Clay with folks running for office all the time on social media. That's what you'll see. You'll see Clay in a picture posing with God knows who. He's always traveling somewhere. He's always doing something. He's always busy. I know that he's a leader in the Young Democrats organization, and he has worked on so many campaigns. So Clay is our millennial So I'm going to start with you, Greer, first, and ask you a few things here. So, Greer, first I need you to tell me, what is North Carolina Town Hall and what is YAP? What are they exactly?
Sure. So again, thank you for having me here tonight. It's a pleasure to be on with my brother Clay. He is literally everywhere, as you mentioned, Pam. But North Carolina Town Hall, and I know we'll get into this maybe in a later question, Pam, but North Carolina Town Hall was an event that I put on with some peers after the Parkland High School shooting. And some of you will remember that was in 2018. Some of you out there may not remember it because we've had so many school shootings since then, unfortunately. But that was a school shooting down in Florida, and that really stirred a lot of young people across the United States to action when it comes to gun violence prevention and keeping ourselves safe in schools. And so I worked with about 4 or 5 of my peers at Sanderson High School in Raleigh, and we put on an event where about 500 of our community members in Raleigh came out to our high school, and we had a 2-hour-long conversation about how young people could play a role in keeping ourselves safe in school, and then more generally what legislators, politicians, what law enforcement officials and school counselors, what mental health advocates and mental health therapists could do to really pour into our young people and to make sure that we're feeling safe and protected and included and secure in our schools. And so that's really how I got started when it comes to local advocacy in the Triangle area. But I like to say all the time, anyone can be an activist. All it takes is you finding that courage within yourself and using your voice for positive change, being willing, being bold and willing to speak up for what you know is right, and for the safety and security of others. And so that's the North Carolina Town Hall. That was a one-time event in 2018, but that actually led me to co-found Young Americans Protest, or YAP for short, as you mentioned. I did that with 2 of my peers. One, Woody Wise, he's up in school now in New York. And then 2, Zainab Baloch. She ran to be the first Muslim mayor of Raleigh, and she's a known advocate in the Triangle area. And so Young Americans Protest is a nonprofit that also started in 2018 after that town hall event. And our goal is to plug young people into the political systems in their communities across the state of North Carolina, especially rural communities. We know that those pockets are super important when it comes to elections, but also when it comes to young people having their voices historically suppressed. And so we look at rural areas, we look at young people of color, because we know that historically that age group 18 to 25 includes voters that don't turn out as regularly as other age groups. And I know Clay is nodding and he knows this as well, but it's so important. There's a lot of power there that is untapped. That goes untapped during election season. So YAP, or Young Americans Protest, is a nonprofit that I help lead while in college here at UNC that really encourages and destigmatizes politics. The root word of politics, I like to tell people, POL, just means people. And so we can't really separate it from our day-to-day lives. And it's important. It's important, right, that young people understand that and use, and like I said, raise their voices to be change makers in their local communities.
Very good. Oh, great. I feel hopeful. I feel like a big sigh of relief that you guys get it and that somebody is doing something about it, you know. So the work that you're doing here in North Carolina, I know you mentioned about it all really sparked from the Parkland mass shooting we had down there in Florida. So do you know, Greer, of any other organizations that have tentacles that are doing it in other states, just like you are here, or what?
I think there are many similar groups in other states. I can definitely put in the chat, and then after we talk, Pam, I can type them up and put them on Facebook for our viewers tonight, because I can't think of specific names, but I know that there are organizations out there similar to YAP, because Young Americans Protest was one of the coalition organizing groups after George Floyd was horrifically murdered in 2020. And so we were in touch with groups around the United States that included young people trying to make a positive change in their communities when it comes to gun violence, when it came to police brutality and issues of racial inequity. And so there are groups out there in other states, and we're hoping to collaborate. I know I'd love to hear, Clay's thoughts here, but young people and nonprofits are going to have to work together as we push toward the 2022 midterms. And so I'm looking to reestablish some of those connections, Pam, from 2020 as as we do build a uniting force here, especially in the South, to elect some politicians and some change makers that will really allow us to thrive as Black and Brown Americans, that will allow us to thrive as young people. Because I know that when you elevate the most marginalized, you uplift and you increase the opportunity of success and progress for all Americans, for each community member. And so it's important that we work to break down those historic barriers. And I do know that there are young folks and nonprofits all around the United States that are working towards similar goals. And I'll drop some of those in the chat toward the end of our conversation.
Please do. Please do. If you put them in the chat, they'll live there and it'll be on YouTube. And people, when they come and hear playbacks and stuff, they can see that. I really appreciate that, Greer. That is fantastic. And Clay DeSouza. Clay.
Hello, good evening,
Tell
man.
me, hey. Clay and I, this is a moment of transparency. Clay and I actually, I think we met through NABJ, which is the National Association of Black Journalists. And we also are in the organization together on a local level as well as a national level. So, Clay, tell me some things that you're working on. What you got going on for these millennials, your peers, what you're hearing. We're going to get into that a little more, but tell me what you're working on now.
Sure. Well, at this time, I'm all about getting, obviously, just like-minded individuals, especially if they're under 40 or if they are aligned towards policies and platforms that represent, obviously, our ideals, such as Black and Brown issues such as decriminalizing marijuana, just to name one, and criminal justice reform, environmental justice. Those are the things that I'm tackling. And the way I'm tackling them is through aligning myself with candidates who represent those and working with them on different fronts, whether it's through fundraising, whether it's through messaging or through operations, which is going door to door, and even through the virtual space. Obviously, because of COVID and all, that's more of a main staple now than prior when I've done this work, obviously. So to me, it's not really even just restricted to the Raleigh-Durham area where we all live, respectively. It's really anywhere where there's a candidate for Senate, U.S. Senate, whose election could help tilt the balance of power. So, like for instance, Gary Chambers in Louisiana, if you're familiar with him, obviously he has a very big platform. He smoked a marijuana blunt in a campaign ad. He's been going for the media circuit right now. So that's just one candidate. So I'm not really restricted to just candidates in North Carolina or Raleigh-Durham, but really anywhere.
And this show isn't about just restricting just to North Carolina. It just so happens that you guys, I know I met Greer, I've met you through social media, so that's how I knew of you, and I told you how I know of Clay. But let me ask you guys this. Greer, ask you first. Are the young people there on campus really aware of what's the voting is about to come up? Because we've been through so much here in North Carolina with the redistricting, and we're getting a vote here. No, we're not voting. Now we're going to do it in May. So tell me how that's going.
Well, it certainly has been confusing, Pam. And I think part of the, I like to call the big three when you're talking about advocacy and voting and social justice. I told Clay this not long ago, but education has to come first. It just has to. Folks have to know what's going on. We have to be able to talk about reality and the truth and what's at stake among one another. And then we can protest and challenge the injustices that we face every day. And that third step of the equation of true change, I like to call it, is policy change, right? Electing officials that represent our interests and holding them accountable. So that big three of education, protesting, and policy change is critical, I believe. And so education is the first step. I do want to just quickly piggyback off what Clay was saying, especially in 2020 with the rise of COVID-19, and we saw the social justice movements. The civil rights movement really has just continued from the 50s and 60s. It never really ended. And social media is such an important idea. It's such an important construct when it comes to advocacy. And so this term virtual advocacy is something that became really popular in 2020 and is continuing. So Pam, to your question about groups interacting from around the United States and up and down the East Coast, I think social media and Zoom, as much as folks are tired of it, is powerful. It allows for more engagement. It allows for more accessibility. People that wouldn't be able to make the drive or physically can't make it to certain protests or meetings are now able to join with the virtual component. And so that's something that I would certainly encourage groups and then certainly encourage young people to continue using as we are advocating for the future that we want to see. But when it comes to campus here at UNC Chapel Hill, over here in the southern part of heaven, as some people call it, I think that it's super important that young people turn out. And here at UNC, we do have a great history, a long and storied history, not only of civil rights and civil rights achievements, but of voting and of presidential candidates coming to campus, of senatorial candidates coming to campus and wanting to hear about young people's interests and ideas. And so I think that I think now is the time, certainly, to talk up and drum up interest and energy around the 2022 midterms, because they're coming. They're coming fast. They're coming hard. Even local elections. And so I think, Pam, the complexity when it comes to college campuses and voting is that a lot of young folks in college are still registered back home, wherever they originate. And so it's important to especially for the students that are registered here in Chapel Hill, for example, encourage them to learn about when the elections are, where is their polling place or their polling precinct. Are they registered here, on campus, or are they still registered back home? It's important to vote in either place. And so just talking up the importance of voting and following that up again with protesting and following that up with holding our elected officials accountable and policy change. I really think young people are interested in it all. We do really want to see a change being made when it comes to those issues that Clay mentioned: environmental justice, racial justice more broadly, but police brutality, decreasing that, diminishing gun violence, protecting folks from this pandemic. This thing is still going on, people. COVID-19 is not over. So getting people vaccinated and understanding that the future is really ours. Young people are those that are going to be here for the longest amount of time. So we deserve a say in the policies that are passed.
That's right.
And the laws that are enacted. And so for me, Pam, it looks like using social media. It looks like using word of mouth to tell, fellow Tar Heels, look, let's figure out where you are registered to vote. Let's make sure that you vote not only in November, but wherever and whenever you can in these local and municipal elections, because some of them have been moved to this year. And let's make sure that your voice counts, because your vote definitely matters. And we want to make sure that you're able to cast it and that you're able to vote for the people that you want and the people that you feel best represent your interests.
Right. Very good. Clay, what would you like to chime in with that?
Well, Greer, you make a lot of great points. You said it all, and great to have you on tonight. Forgive me for not saying that at the top, but just overall, people need to turn out. We say this every election cycle, and I know a lot of us are very fatigued by the state of politics and the political divisiveness going on out there, but that's even more reason to vote. I've voted in every election since I've been 18. Doesn't matter where I live, what jurisdiction. I voted in California by absentee ballot. I voted here. I voted every town, even if it was the smallest of towns here in North Carolina, like for instance, Graham in Alamance County. I voted in off year election. There ain't nothing least sexy than voting in a small town and off year election. Who are old and, excuse my French, but white. But I still did it because I wanted to activate myself in the process.
Right.
I'm going to live here, wherever your town, pay taxes,
right, and
all those other things.
Right.
I'm gonna at least cast a ballot, even if I got to write in Mickey Mouse or Jesus Christ. No, I don't do that. but that's the mindset that we all need to have. It doesn't matter where you live, activate yourself in the process. If not just for the candidates, there's ballot measures depending on which state you live in. There's something to vote on.
That's right.
Obviously, the more local, the more the rubber meets the road.
That's right. And the main thing that I just want to make sure you have to drive home on each of these shows that I do is that every elected official matters. Every elected position matters. Think about it in Flint. I think there was somebody over the water board or something. Okay. I mean, really, really, somebody made decisions there that poisoned a whole lot of people. And they, 9 times out of 10, they were part of an elected structure. And if we don't vote, we really give away our power, because literally the reason why we are in the situation that we're in here in North Carolina right now is that nobody voted in the midterms when President Obama got elected the first time. I know I was out in the rain yelling his name on the corners with posters. I was everything. But I have that habit of voting every time. And you guys obviously were raised that same way, because I really believe that those habits, just like, your values and stuff, they start at home and then they go out this way. And so a lot of, I imagine that you guys run into people who don't have that same upbringing or background like you, Clay, and grassroots, and you, Greer. I don't know, what's your background? Are your parents very political, or heavy into advocacy and what have you?
Yeah, I mean, my parents have always encouraged me to vote. I'm only 21 now, but I voted in every election that I've been eligible to vote. I do want to just harp on Clay's point, because it's important to understand that municipal or local elections really do matter. And I think they're overlooked so often, but municipal elections matter. I mean, that's who's controlling your water and your sewage, policing, it's the list goes on and on. Transportation to a certain extent, parks, all of that is local. And so it is important to vote for the president of the United States and for top positions, but it's also important, and maybe even more so important, to vote for those that are making decisions that will impact your daily lives directly.
Exactly.
And that's something my parents and my grandparents have always instilled in me. And so I think that it does start at home. A lot of this does, but there are ways that we can become stronger advocates for those that may not have been taught at home the importance of voting, or the importance of protesting, or using every political avenue you have to raise your voice. Because I just look around and see all of these attacks on the truth and on voting.
Yes.
If our votes and our voices didn't matter, these folks wouldn't be out here attacking them and trying to suppress them so hard, right?
That's right. That's right.
So that is even more, it should fuel us more. It should encourage us to get out and vote, and to protest if we're not able to vote, or to protest if we don't like what's going on, even more so when we see these efforts to not only suppress our vote, but to limit who gets a say in the electoral process and the political process. And we know that historically, these processes have centered the voices of white folks in the United States. And so it's important, again, that we all work together, and that we do have unity, but unity can't come without accountability. And so now what we need is accountability, and that looks like voting, that looks like protesting, that looks like drumming up energy and encouraging young people to come out stronger, and to not only vote, but to follow up that vote with letters and emails to our elected officials, making sure that they know that we're here, that we're going to be around, and that we have ideas, we have thoughts and opinions as to how we can keep ourselves and our community safe. And so it does start at home, but I think there is a responsibility on each one of us to, whenever and wherever we can, speak up, and encourage those around us to not only vote, but to understand and educate themselves, to educate those around them as to what's going on in the political systems, not only here in Chapel Hill or in Raleigh, but in rural areas across the state and across the country. It's all connected, and it does matter. Our vote matters, our voices matter. And I think that you can't say that enough, especially in the Black and Brown community, because history has taught us over and over that, history has told us, over and over, that we don't matter, but we certainly do.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. Clay, what have you, in your work, what have you learned anything about the Hispanic community and their voting and what have you? Have you learned anything about that? Because what I've been noticing, and this is just me observations, is that I'm noticing that there's this push, but what particularly like in Florida, places like that where some of that vote leans very much to the Republican side of things, which is really voting against their own best interests. And I kind of don't understand that. What have you observed anything with that?
Well, so this is a very complex answer I'm about to provide. There's a lot of complexity to this because the Hispanic vote, the reason why you don't hear too much of it to the degree that you used to, I would say going back to presidential cycles ago, is because it's a vote that you cannot predict. What I mean by that specifically is there are a lot of Hispanic voters who either consider themselves and vote as either a white individual, a white citizen, or a African American citizen. Case in point, if you're in Florida, for instance, you will have Hispanic voters who identify themselves as white Hispanic and thus white in general. Thereby, they vote Republican. And that's really because specifically, I'm going to use South Florida as an example. You have a very large Cuban Venezuelan population, which is very, very Republican because they have been messaged. They've been messaged that anything that's progressive, liberal, or democratic is all about socialism or drumming that up through public policy. So therefore, identity politics comes into play and all of that comes into play. So therefore, you will have a lot of those who identify as white Hispanics. They really do go into identity politics and they consider themselves, as silly and crazy as it may sound, as white voters. So therefore, they vote Republican right down the list. And you see it's very common amongst Cuban Americans, especially in Miami-Dade County, for instance, and even Broward counties and such. Now, contrast that with Hispanic voting in New York or the Northeast. They're Puerto Rican in many cases or Dominican in some cases. If asked, depending on where, they'll consider themselves African American in most cases. Therefore, they're going to vote more Democratic because that's how the identity politics plays there. The Hispanic vote is very hard to measure because of those factors, and not to mention the vote of Hispanics overall in a populace. It's always fluctuating. It's very hard to predict. That's also why it's very hard to measure through many cycles, because one cycle, for instance, in 2008, Hispanics widely voted for Obama, not to the same degree as 97%, give or take, that African Americans did for Obama, but why we went for Obama. In 12, the numbers start to really chip away down gratuitously. In 16, obviously there was a lot more Hispanics who voted for Trump, and the same case was 2020. Because of 16 and 20, there really hasn't been a push. This is just me speaking from my political analysis. So I'm just really just kind of disclaiming myself right there. So, but a lot of those voters went for Trump. To what percentages? I don't have those numbers to present here. And you can I always encourage fact check me or encourage to do research on your own. But at the very least, I am confident in saying that the numbers skewed a lot more towards Trump than they did in 08 and 12 and such. Therefore, the Democratic Party, and I'm going to be very critical here in this aspect, is not doing a very good job of its messaging towards.
It doesn't. We're going to do a whole show on messaging.
Let's say we don't have enough time.
The Democratic Party.
We don't have enough time.
I've got some professors already lined up because that are in communications. We are because I have been fussing about this forever. I didn't need to interrupt you, but
okay.
You pulled a trigger.
Right.
Well, I think Clay's right. If I could just jump in and kind of agree quickly, because I know we're dwelling on the subject, but it's important, especially in a state like North Carolina. He gave you Florida and New York. North Carolina is a very diverse state when it comes to the East Coast. we've got the mountains, we've got the beaches. We also have the highest Native American population east of the Mississippi. We have a good African American population. And so messaging is important. I know you're going to do a whole show on that, Pam, but I think we really need to follow that Stacey Abrams playbook that really took Georgia by storm. Go into these rural areas, go to where people are and ask, what do you need? How can we help you? Instead of telling them what to do or telling them why the other party or the other option is a bad one, asking what do folks need and here's how we're going to provide those resources for you seems to be a better strategy and a better game plan. If I could, Pam, you were asking about groups. If I could plug one here in North Carolina, there's one called the January 6th Project. That's that I'm a part of that came after January 6th, of course, the horrendous insurrection on our Capitol. But this is a group dedicated to increasing voter turnout in North Carolina, specifically for those in rural areas and for Latinx or Latino voters. And so, we have these groups here and we're working hard to kind of supplement what parties or other groups are already doing. And January 6th is nonpartisan, but it's important to know that young people and older generations are working together and trying to make sure that folks here in our state know the importance of voting, know the importance of using your voices and getting your thoughts out, and allowing those who are sworn to serve us, right? Sworn to advocate on our behalf. They need to know what we're thinking. And one of the ways we can do that is by voting them into office, people that align with our viewpoints. And so to Clay's point, there are a lot of dynamics at play, but the most important thing to remember is that we do have power when we unite and work together around any issue. And voting is one of those. Protesting is one that's near and dear to my heart. But understanding that here in North Carolina, we're a very diverse state, and we've always been a politically active state, a purple state, you could say. Yes. We're always at play when it comes to national and even statewide elections. They're always close. And so it does come down to each individual finding that wherewithal to go out and vote. But we can every one of us listening in, and our friends and family members, our communities can do more and should do more starting right now to get people to vote, to get people to do research, as Clay was mentioning, on these candidates, and to do research generally. Find an issue that you're passionate about and look up on Google what's being done about that issue here in your community or here in the state. If nothing's being done, right, an elected official. I encourage you to reach out to me. I'll put my information in the chat, but I'm at.
Please do. And I definitely want you to put in the information about the January 6th organization, because next week we're going to have Professor Irving Joyner from North Carolina Central's law school, and he's going to talk to us about January 6th. And I was looking to add somebody else into that mix in the discussion. So I'm very interested in hearing. Put all of that information, you guys, social handles and everything in the chat, so that when people see the playback for this and those that are on now, they can connect with you. Okay?
That sounds great. And just a quick plug now for those listening, it's jan6project.org. jan6project.org is the website. The full name is January 6th Project, dedicated to voter education. And so this is a new group that's doing good work and attempting our best to increase awareness when it comes to voting in rural areas across our state, and especially among young people and African Americans and Latino voters. And so I didn't want to dwell on that point, but I think it's an important one that Clay's making, to do that research and to understand that North Carolina is a power player when it comes to politics. And so, it's overwhelming sometimes, but we've seen, even with COVID-19, the importance of staying engaged and staying committed. Pam, I know you and I were talking via email, and folks ask me all the time, how do you manage your time? There's so much going on. How do you pick and choose what to be passionate about? And I think that it's important to realize that self-care has to come first, right? You don't want to be pouring out of yourself from a place of emptiness. You want to be full. So definitely take the time to recharge, make sure that you are spending time with your loved ones, because politics, and especially being Black in America and engaged and interested in politics, can be a lot sometimes, but we know it matters. And so we need all of our social justice warriors charged up and ready to go here in 2022 and moving into future years. And so I think it's important to also take time to do what you love, to step away from politics, but to stay interested and intrigued as we continue to push into 2022. 2024 is right around the corner. And I think it's important, like Clay mentioned, there's always something going on.
It is.
And there's something, that everyone can contribute to the political process. So it's important to stay engaged, but of course, make sure that you're coming from a place of being full and understanding that, your personal safety and self-care is important. It's something the pandemic has certainly taught me.
That's for sure. Clay, I'm going to give you the final word on this segment, because the next speaker I've got coming up is Cedric Herring, and he's running for Wake County Sheriff. And Greer, I think that you'll be very interested in what he has to say. So, Clay, you get the last word on this segment.
Oh, yes, I would just say, just to echo off of Greer, stay involved, stay informed, stay engaged, and be a concerned citizen always. And as you mentioned, don't operate from an empty place or space at all, because the reality is that politics will wear you out. From as a political professional and activist and advocates, I can tell you that firsthand. And don't just be single-sided. What I mean by that is, in theory, always be multi-partisan, cross-partisan. And I'm not just saying that. I'm not saying go work with the crazies for anyone to be out of context.
Absolutely not.
What I mean by that specifically is that we all have to hold Democrats accountable as well. Because I will even contend and argue that sometimes a lot of Black folks are too busy surviving to be Democrats. And the messaging has to get better from the Democratic side, because the way this midterm cycle is looking, I have an analysis and a thought on that, but I will reserve those for another time or later time. But the fact of the matter is, you have to stay engaged, stay registered, and stay voting, because if you don't, we're going to be right back having the same conversations, and hold every candidate accountable. Just because they have a D next to their name, or just because you like them there for whatever, hold them all accountable. And because no one's perfect, so therefore you have to show up and show out.
That's right. That's right. You guys, I have enjoyed you so much, and please put your information in your social media handles in the chat, and you are welcome here anytime, because we have got to push. And so any information, anytime you got something to share, please feel free to come back. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Greer and Clay. And I hope you guys stay on in the chat and participate and listen to my next guest. Okay.
Thank you, Pam, for having me.
All right,
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, weren't they dynamic young men? I feel better already. I feel like we have some great leaders in the pipeline for our nation, because we need it. We need great leaders. All right, so the second half of our show, we have candidate for Wake County Sheriff, Cedric Herring. And there he is. Hey, Cedric.
How you doing today, Pam?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing well.
What did you think about those young men?
Just like you said, I think I see a congressman, a senator, a president. I don't know.
Yes.
But I'm very impressed with both Greer and Clay.
Yes. Well, listen, I need to introduce you formally. Cedric Herring is a native of Goldsboro, North Carolina. Upon graduating from high school, he enlisted in the U.S. Army, where he ended his 4-year obligation. When he ended his 4-year obligation to the Army, he left with numerous honors. There were so many, we'd be here all day listening, but they included 2 Bronze Stars. He left the Army in 1991 and enrolled in night school for basic law enforcement training. He first became a law enforcement officer in his native city of Goldsboro. And later he moved to Wake County after he married his wife and all that good stuff, and worked for the city of Cary as an officer. He applied to become a state trooper in 1996, but he wasn't selected. And I'm glad that you tell this story because it shows it's a whole story here about perseverance.
Nice.
He wasn't selected at that time, but as fate would have it, he met the late, I call him the late great Wake County Sheriff John H. Baker. Oh, he was something. I remember him well. I used to do PR for the Garner Road Family YMCA, which is now the Garner Community Center.
Yes.
And he would be there very often. Wonderful man. So he, the late Sheriff Baker hired him as a deputy for Wake County Sheriff's Office, and he decided to reapply again to become a North Carolina State Trooper in 2003, and he was accepted. So perseverance pays. He retired from the state troop as a state trooper in 2019. He's a tireless worker. He went back to the Wake County Sheriff's Office and worked there for a little bit again. He has been in law enforcement for 29 years on both the city, county, and state level. Those are some serious qualifications. And one of his great honors, and I wanted to ask you about this. You got the Order of the Longleaf Pine from Governor Roy Cooper. What'd you get it for? Because that's the highest honor you can get from our governor.
Yes, ma'am. That's just the honor that they give you when you reach a retirement level for the Highway Patrol once you are actually at that retirement level.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay, well, I learned something here. So, Cedric,
yes,
I was looking at the demographics of Wake County, and I remember when Mecklenburg was the biggest county in North Carolina of its 100 counties. And now it's Wake County, and we beat Mecklenburg. Wake County has beat out Mecklenburg County by just under 14,000 people.
Right.
And you want to be the sheriff of the largest county in the state of North Carolina. And I feel the weight of that just talking about it because, listen, we're just going to talk before we get into what your platform is. We're just going to talk. Right? You're a black man. A black man has held the sheriff's office for quite a few years here in Wake County.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a few years. So that's not unusual. But we're in a very different time now because we've dealt with the America's reckoning with the George Floyd case in 2020. Mm-hmm. You are also a father of 3 young adult African-American men. Mm-hmm. And I just want to get your perspective on, did that make, I already know that you have your values and what have you, but does it make you pause even a little bit for wanting to take on such a huge responsibility here in Wake County?
Yes, it does. It definitely makes you pause to think about the size of this county. We're talking about 1.2 million citizens, and now we're talking about children as well in that group, maybe under the age of being able to vote, but they are very important because they are future. When you look at Greer and Clay, it's just amazing how advanced they are in their knowledge and wisdom. You would think that as their age, they would not know as much about the politics and the issues that we deal with every day in law enforcement, but they're very knowledgeable about where we are and where we need to be. So Wake County is such a diverse county, and we're continuing to grow every day. I think they said about 70 to 75 people move into Wake County daily. So this county is going to continue to grow. We battled there with Mecklenburg, but yes, it's going to take a progressive mind for law enforcement to move the county into the future.
Okay. All right. So, with all of these, you've got people saying defund the police, which that's another term in messaging that is very, it's not the right messaging. And I think that what they really mean is that they want to reshift priorities and get better training and get mental health professionals dealing with certain calls, because they're, for the most part, I don't know that in regular policing or whatever that you're taught how to deal with people with mental health issues. Tell me, what do you think about that?
Well, I understand exactly what you mean. When you say defund the police, I think when people think about, hey, we don't want to give funds to the police so that they can train or do the things that they have to do to come out to take an actual call. But I think you say defund the police, I understand some level of what you mean when you say mental health. We need a mental health professional to be a part of our organization so that we get educated. So I think it's more restructuring of the funds for police. And so that we don't just give the money to those who may come out and take the call and your first line responder, and you don't have the ability to deal with a mental health situation. Well, what those funds should have been allocated for somebody who could assist us in the training. So I think it's just restructuring the infrastructure of the actual agency, and saying that we're not just pouring our money into an agency and we don't know where it's going. Put it into the mental health and drug addiction, opioid addiction, and things like that, that we can now slow the process down of maybe having to deal with actual mental health situations. But if we do have to deal with it, we have officers who have resources to get trained to deal with those matters. I've been in many training classes in 28 years and know that we may have a class in once a year, maybe for an hour, about mental health and how to respond to a call. That's not going to cut it. We have to dig a little deeper and understand who is that person that we're dealing with, what situation is it coming out of.
And that may even mean that in the hiring process, I know in Wake County and I know in Durham County, not Wake County, in Orange County, I know that they do have some social workers that actually go out on certain runs to kind of de-escalate people, because they've been trained in those types of things. They're professional in doing that, and it's I haven't seen all the statistics on it, but it seems to be working for them. It helps. It helps, because nobody wants to go in with people that have mental health and harm them or whatever, when you just don't understand what's really going on. But anyways, let's get off of that. Let's talk about your campaign. What made you decide to run for sheriff of Wake County?
Well, I was kind of skirting around the idea of being honest about why I'm running. But one of my campaign slogans is honesty. So I'm going to have to be honest. So starting out and being very transparent, I stayed out of this race all the way up until like late January. I was looking at the candidates that were actually already in the race, and I had to be honest with myself and evaluate myself on a level of ability. Yes, I have 28 years in law enforcement, but people don't follow leaders because they have an education. They don't follow leaders because they have a title. They follow leaders because they trust them. They follow leaders because they make them feel safe in their career, and they actually see that person can lead by example. So as I was looking at each candidate and evaluating myself at the same time, I just felt like I had a honest ability to take this county and progressively move it into the direction of where the diversity is here, where we have to sit down with people like Greer and understand that when they protest, that we can't sit behind the desk and not go out and say, hey, what do you need? What is the difference that we can make in ending this protest, so that we all understand that the police have to be accountable. We will be accountable on our end. We're just asking, how can we serve you to make sure that you understand what accountability we're asking you for? So when I looked at myself, I said, I have the leadership ability to take this county and move it forward in a example where I am actually the example. And so when you deal with mental health and you're talking about how do you go out and handle a call with a subject that's been, we don't know the evaluation of them, but we can see that this person is struggling with a mental health situation. Well, if the sheriff is out here and he's showing us what the expectation is, if he's a working sheriff, he's not behind the desk, he allows his leadership to run the office. But we have to get out here and show these young deputies by firsthand examples of what we expect. Throughout my 28-year career, that's what I've been. I've been a working trooper. I've been a working deputy sheriff when I was there, and I intend to be a working sheriff. So the example that I would set is to say we have to get leadership out of the office. We have to make contact with the youth, and we have to understand who is going to make our future, and it's going to be the youth. They're making our future. They're showing you in these protests, hey, we are going to pay attention to what you're doing to us. So I just think it's a lot of accountability on both sides, and the sheriff has got to be largely a part of, not just the sheriff, the police chiefs. We have to get from behind the desk, and we have to come out into the community.
So would you say that your plans, Cedric, when you become, we'll speak proactively, when you become sheriff, you envision yourself being a community sheriff, meaning that you'll be out in the community and not necessarily behind a desk. I know y'all got a lot of paperwork. Every job has like scads and scads of paper, but you intend to be very active in the community. Is that the approach that you want to take?
Yeah, so when I say proactive sheriff and not being in the office, there are office duties, office administrative duties that every sheriff is going to have to take care of. But he also has a staff, and that staff has a job to do as well. But we have already seen what is happening in this community when we don't come out and engage with the community. Everybody has something to say, and we can all learn from each other. So if we don't get out and find out what it is you're trying to say to us, then how will we ever bridge the gap to say that the police brutality can be addressed, because we can train the officers on what you're saying that's happening out here on that traffic stop. If they're coming in your yard and this is just a mental health situation, but yet you're coming in the yard aggressively to just take a call because you have another call to go to, then we have to slow this down. We have to look at what it is we're dealing with as an agency, and then we have to address the needs of the community. So as a proactive sheriff, yes, I would be in the community. I would be back in the uniform. I would be out in the community dealing with the citizens that elected me to be the sheriff.
Right.
How can you elect me to be the sheriff and you never see me after the 4 years? So I think it's very important that the sheriff is in the community, in every part of the county. Wayne County is a big county. It's
it is
857 square miles of and with 1.2 million people in this county. So we have Knightdale, Wendell, Zebulon, and if you get up on that end of the county, by the time you get to the south side of Fuquay and Apex and Holly Springs, you're talking about a lot of land and a lot of places that we have to engage with a lot of people from the rural communities, as Greer spoke about. In the rural community, what do you need from your local sheriff? Where if I'm in the city of Raleigh, I mean, things are moving fast and they may not need as much, but the accountability has to be the same, whether you're in Raleigh and you have all the resources, or whether you're out in the county and you never get those resources because you never saw the sheriff. You never saw the deputies until you called them. So we don't have any great relationship in the county with the citizens that actually in unincorporated areas, that's who you're actually serving as your local law enforcement, is the unincorporated citizens that's going to dial 911 that expect the deputy sheriff to pull up in your yard.
Right. Let me ask you this. So everybody, from what I'm reading in news media, everyone has a shortage of everything, everybody, it's like the world has a shortage of employable people or employees, period. And when somebody applies to become a deputy with the Wake County Sheriff's Department, do people go through any type of psychological testing or anything like that to become a deputy? What is that process like?
Pam, you're asking a question that I told you I was going to have to be honest with you, and I'm going to be honest with this county. Wake County is not short on deputies because of our ability to hire deputies. We hired over 40 to 50 deputies in 2021. And we also, we're in the process at the time when I resigned there of starting another academy that was going to be developed with 40 deputies. We hired over 80 to 85 detention officers, but we're still in a shortage because of retention. Why are we being able to hire you, but we can't keep you? It is something inside the agency that is broken that has to be fixed so that we can serve the county and make sure that the county needs are being met. So if we're not valuing our employees, if we're not taking the time to understand the training and being able to keep our employees mentally capable of going out and dealing with the issues in the county, then we're not going to be able to serve the county. So we got to fix the inside. We have to fix a broken agency first, and then we'll be able to serve the agency outside as the citizens would expect us to. But to answer your question, the mental health situations, we go out and naturally, when I resigned, I went back to the sheriff's office and I started with Wake County when I retired as a trooper. I went back there in 2019 and I was working in the recruiting division. That's why I know the numbers that I'm referring to are very, very accurate numbers. But in that hiring process, you'll go through a background phase. One, you got physical fitness and reading comprehension. Hey, can you actually do this job? And from that step, you'll move into a background phase. Let's look at your criminal history and what you've been doing in your life as far as your past. And if that all checks out, then we move into, hey, let's get an interview on a review board or a review panel, or you may interview with the sheriff. At this time, you're interviewing with the sheriff. If he decides he's going to hire you and he says, hey, I like this person, I want to hire them, then you go through a mental health evaluation and a physical evaluation. So you'll see a doctor for your physical fitness. For your health. And then you also see a mental health provider, and they'll decide whether you're fit for duty on a mental health level.
Okay. So if you had a magic wand, you had all the budget you needed, you had a good academy of deputies to come forth and what have you, what would be the first thing you'd do on day one?
Well, since we're on the subject of hiring, that's the first thing you have to look at is who are you hiring? Day one, who am I hiring to come in this agency to serve this county? How closely is that person to resemble what I would expect a deputy sheriff to go out and engage with citizens who are calling for help as a peacekeeper, not as a law enforcement officer? Because naturally, if a person is calling for mental health and they're asking for you to come in and help restore peace because I have a family member who's dealing with a crisis, I'm not asking you to come in here and enforce a law. I'm asking you to help me restore order in my house or in my community. And so what I will look at is, who am I hiring? Just because I send a person to a mental health evaluation, just because he checks out physically, he can do the job, I don't think he should be handed a gun in the bag and say, hey, thank you for applying, go out and help me. I think we have to look at the conscience issues of who are we hiring. We have to dig a little deeper to see who this person is and how they're going to respond. But we can't find out what the conscience is going to actually do once you're out on a call. I hired you. I did the best I could in the background to get all the checks off on this person. And then I gave him a gun and a badge and I swore him in to uphold the law. But I know that the person is going to go out and do what is expected of them. That's where the leadership comes in. That's why you can't sit in the office and say that we're going to solve these problems in the community as a leader, and you're not out there with the problem. You can only get what the agency is responding to reactively if you're not out there doing it with them every day. You have got to get these lieutenants and these majors and these captains to hold everybody accountable to whatever the expectation is of the leader, the sheriff. And if he's doing it and the majors are understanding what his agenda is, and then we can all make sure that the deputies understand how we are out here and expected to treat people. So if I had a magic wand, it would be to say, I need to clean up my leadership. My leadership has to understand that the public is who we are serving, and we're not out here on each call. Now, yes, there are times where you're going to answer a call that says, hey, there's a law that's been broken here, and we have to enforce the law. I'm not saying that we need to bring law enforcement down and pat everybody on the back and hey and not answer the call as far as the call for service that there's a crime that's been committed, because we have crimes and people are going to have to go to jail. But we need to be on that call to evaluate that situation for what it is, and not going onto the property and looking at people saying, hey, who can I take to jail today? Because that's some of the philosophies that we have. Let's just be real. I mean, these talks that we have, if we don't talk about issues, I'll come back out here and I'll sound just like a normal person who wants to run for office, and I'll be the same politician, or I'm going to be a sheriff. I'm going to be a sheriff for the people. I want to know what my deputies are doing. You don't have a crime every time you go to a call. But if you do have a crime, understand how to administer the law and enforce the law with the minimum amount of force necessary to effect that arrest. That's all you have to do. I did it for 28 years in my career. You effect that arrest, that person's in custody, you take them to jail, you drop them off, you charge them with whatever that crime is, and you leave it at that. But we have to look at each person as leadership and say that you are leading these people the right way. And if you're not a leader, you have to step aside and allow a leader to come in here and show these young officers how to do this job.
All right. Let me ask you this. I'm curious. So would you agree with me that in the case of George Floyd, when Derek Chauvin was on his neck, and then the other officers were around, and one of them meekly asked him, like, we should check him or something like that. It was as if they were afraid of Derek Chauvin when he knew that this wasn't right, but yet he didn't feel empowered enough to stop it or whatever. So tell us, Cedric, how in that training that you have to empower everybody somehow, so that when you see your fellow officer doing something wrong, even if he's above you, you got to just take the blows and speak up or do something, right?
So in the hiring process, we go through 67 questions about what you might do in a certain situation. And in that hiring process, we give the cadet or the candidate an opportunity to answer the questions honestly. Of course, they're going to say the right thing. But let's just talk about Greer and Clay. They've never been to basic law enforcement training. The citizens that were standing around that situation in Minnesota knew that that was not right. They knew that something was wrong with this picture. And they were saying it as much. He can't breathe. Get off of him. But they were afraid to engage because other officers were around. They had weapons. And what's going to happen to me if I jump in? But now you had other police officers who are standing around a person who has probably more seniority than them, but afraid to step in and do the right thing. That's accountability.
Right.
That's just simple.
Right.
Let's just be accountable for what we do when we wake up in the morning and we go out and do our day. If I'm walking into a store and I see that somebody is doing something wrong, am I going to be accountable enough to say, hey, don't do that? If I'm on a playground and I see two kids engaging and they might, I don't know them, but one's going to hurt the other one, I step in and say, hey, you might not want to do that. But as a police officer, you're telling me that it took training to tell that guy to get off of him, because I'm not getting ready to watch you do this. I'm not going to watch you stay on this guy and choke him until he dies. It's a conscience thing for the guy that was doing it. And it was a cowardly thing for the guys to not step up and say, get off of this man. I'm not going to watch this. We have to be accountable for what we see in our presence everyday life. In life, every day, we're accountable. I'm not going to watch somebody treat somebody else wrong. As an individual, you don't have to be in law enforcement to be accountable. We made this a law enforcement issue, but this is a human issue. This is a human issue that was wrong in the presence of society. The whole world saw something that was bad. Yeah.
Well, literally the whole world saw it. literally and figuratively. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Did you tell us what your platform is exactly?
I
'Cause
didn't
we've
say
talked so
exactly.
much.
I
Yeah.
didn't say exactly. I mean, of course, as much as I've talked about leadership, my
Mm-hmm.
platform has to start with leadership.
Mm-hmm.
In our agency that I felt like, and when I left there a few weeks ago, when I announced that I was running for sheriff, uh, it has to start with leadership. Um, the first thing I'm going to address is the leadership in the agency, and from that, we can bring equality to the citizens in this county. If we
Mm-hmm.
have good leaders teaching young deputies what their expectations are of what it means to be sworn to uphold the law and take a person's liberty, then equality has to be the very next thing I address as far as the equality and how you treat everyone. Everybody deserves to be treated the same. Whatever the
Mm-hmm.
call is, you should treat the person as you would expect to be treated. And if there's a law that is broken, understand your ability to engage with that person and enforce that law with the minimum amount of force necessary to make that arrest. And after the equality, we got to look at police brutality. And
Mm-hmm.
in our agency that I'm a leader in, I think if I got good leadership, I think if I'm pushing the idea that everybody has to be treated the same, then police brutality will come to a very minimal because we're not accepting that as a response here. Police
Mm-hmm.
brutality is not going to be accepted in this agency because if you follow the equality and the leadership, then police brutality can't happen. And we got other issues inside our agency that we really need to look at because detention is so important. We leave detention out of conversations with our sheriff's office. But when we look at the fact that half of our agency is a detention staff, we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about 400 to 500 deputies, five to 600 detention officers. We have two detention facilities in Wake County. A lot of people may not know that we house in one over 900 residents in that one facility. So when we look at what the detention staff in this county is dealing with, when you're talking about coronavirus, we got quarantine pods where we're having to make adjustments on keeping them separated and then also keeping them safe. We have to deal with their mental health. We have to deal with their nutrition. We have to deal with a lot of issues inside of facilities. We have a full medical staff that are providing health care for people who need their medication. So when we look at the struggle that we have inside the detention center, that is going to be a very important platform that I have to get in and solve so that we can make this agency run smoothly through a full circle of sworn deputies, sworn officers, and we're addressing people who are in custody, and we're helping people that are not in custody that are out in the community. So a sheriff has a huge responsibility. I think a lot of people leave the
Yes.
idea that the detention center is a big part of your decision making on who your sheriff is. Not that one would think that, hey, I need to be concerned who my sheriff is because I might go to jail. But we have family members, we have people who we still love and care for that may not be my family that are in custody. And we want to make sure that everybody in this county is taken care of, whether I know them or not. I want to know that if they're in the custody of the sheriff, that their needs are being met.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to really look at the detention facility and make sure that that is a functioning facility that is broken right now. They're working very short, not because of hiring, but because of retention. Why are we losing so many people?
Yeah. I have a question for you, and then this will be the last one, and we'll wrap it up. It's kind of a loaded question, actually. We have so much gun violence all across our nation. I mean, it's just unreal. And one thing that I noticed, there was a horrible news story in Charlotte where the perpetrators of these drive-bys, where they shot up this home and a 3-year-old was killed, they were 14. And I'm trying to figure out who's at 14 in a car. They obviously were with some older people as well, but there, I mean, these young kids are being charged with murder because they've actually done the crimes. And I don't know how, I don't know. How do we, how do you deal with something like that? You know, with these young people out here committing heinous crimes like that. How do you even begin to try to fix something like that?
Well, I don't think it's a loaded question. I really think we have to look at it for what it is. Guns are out of control in the United States. We have to look at it as a bigger picture. The federal government has to. They have to acknowledge that on both sides of the table have to be bipartisan and agreeing that we have a problem with guns. People are taking guns into our schools and shooting our children. And we have to look at a gun for what it is. It is a weapon. The Constitution allows you to have a gun, and the reason you do have the right to have it, we cannot take that right from people.
But
we
you know what, Cedric, when they wrote that that article about the right to bear weapons, they had muskets back then. They didn't have no AR-15s. I mean, my God, it's just common sense. You know, you can't even use an AR-15 or some of these guns these people are using to hunt with because it's illegal. So why do we even have them? You know, well, that's a rhetorical question, I know, but still, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Well, what we got to do is we still got to make sure that we understand that the Constitution allows people to own a weapon, and it doesn't say what that particular weapon is. So we can't say that we have a right to do some things in life, and then because the Constitution, we don't necessarily agree with that particular law. So the Constitution, we don't want to uphold their right. So we want to honor everybody's rights. Let's just leave that right to have a weapon. But what we have to do is we have to look at what a weapon is and how do we get it out of the hands of young people, irresponsible people who are going to use this weapon in a dangerous manner instead of for the protection of their home. For whatever reason you have that particular weapon, that's what you have. But how do we keep that weapon out of those who are going to use a weapon inappropriately and hurt people and use it to rob or kill people in your community? We got young people who are doing this now. We have to engage with the youth. When we start talking about police departments and getting guns out of individual hands of young kids, let's get them before they are willing to get the gun. And we can do our individual part as citizens, say, hey, I have a youth in my family and he's troubled and I need to get him to somebody. Well, if we had a more engaging police agencies in this state, in this county, then maybe we could reduce that with the young people by engaging with them in law enforcement and getting them to understand why we carry weapons and how safe we have to be with weapons. I told you, I think we were just in some talk when I was young. A lot of people don't understand. Look, I was not the best child growing up. I actually would be considered a troubled youth when I was growing up. They took me when I was around 12 or 13. I was in that what they call Scare Straight program, which I thought was at the time. Now as an adult, I thought it was a bad program because we don't want to scare children. We want to redirect them. But today I wouldn't want to put a kid in a van and drive them to Raleigh, from Wayne County to Raleigh, take them into Central Prison and put them in front of the prisoners in there with all these different charges as they did with me and tell me this is what's going to happen to you if you keep doing what you're doing. I don't think that program was beneficial for me. It didn't scare me because I didn't have that desire to hurt people. I was just troubled in deciding, hey, I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm acting up in class. But what I was also doing is when I would be, on the other side of town, I'd walk into a police department because I was fascinated with the uniform. I was fascinated with the idea of wearing a uniform and the shoes and the car and all those things. So I would stop by the police department. So when I went in, the police agency, they started a youth program called Junior Police Officers. I got to get shout out to Mount Olive Police Department. They had a Mount Olive Junior Police Department. We would help with the Pickle Festival, traffic, and things like that. But we were able to.
Pickle Festival.
Yeah, that's what they have. They have that pickle plant down there. So it was a big pickle festival. And we were able to work in the parking lot. But we had a khaki shirt on, pants. And that was my first introduction to being a police officer. And
Mhm.
I really feel like if I was a sheriff, and I will be the sheriff of Wake County, let's start a youth program. Let's start engaging with some of these programs that Greer might be a part of, and that Young America protest. And let's get some of the young kids to say, hey, I think with the colleges, they start recruiting these kids around the ninth grade, maybe eighth grade, if they think they're good enough. And by the time they're in 11th grade, NC State's already put their hands on them. Carolina's already got their hands on them. Say, hey, we want you to play football here. But they started looking at the kid when he was in the 8th and 9th grade. So why can't we in a police agency look at youth that way and say, hey, let's go out to the school. We're going to start a program of junior deputies in Wake County and give them the opportunity to come and engage at a young age and say, this is what we do. This is we can show you once you make it to a certain stage of this, what a weapon is. So we're talking about guns. And so that's why I'm leading back to how do we educate some youth? Maybe we take those kids that are troubled in a situation and start teaching them and starting this program and getting out and having talk with moms that are dealing with a young kid that is maybe engaging in bad stuff and getting them around a police officer as I was, and I got, turned around. And so you start a program like that to take a kid that's in the 8th grade, 7th grade, when they're ready to be a part of a program like that and develop that program all the way up until they're graduating high school. Maybe they graduate high school and go on to Wake Tech, take a 2-year program, take basic law enforcement training, and there you have police officers that have been engaged in your agency for the last 5 or 6 years. So that's the things we have to start being innovative about and thinking about what can we do outside of we can't get in everybody's car and everybody's house to say, give me your guns. But we can start young in the elementary schools and start developing programs to touch the youth, that if we touch the youth early enough, then we can change the future, because they wouldn't be that kid that's out here that at 18 or 19 using a gun inappropriately.
Absolutely. So when is voting? When is it time to vote?
I tell you that Greer and Clay, they were talking about this voting, and we got to push people to understand voting primary. You have to get out here in this midterm election, and you have to vote in the primaries and make sure that you vote in November. So the primaries, I think early voting starts in April the 28th, I believe it is. And then April the 28th to May the 4th, that's your early voting. We want people to early vote. Yes. That way you don't get stuck in that line on May 17th. But if you do get in that line, be patient. Understand the importance of electing your sheriff, electing those officials that make a lot of decisions in your everyday life.
Right.
That is that sheriff. He is making a lot of decisions on what takes place in your community, who is answering that 911 call, and what that agency actually is about, and how their philosophy is about law enforcement. And so that's why it's so important for you to vote on May the 17th and make sure you get your vote in to say, I want this person, instead of just allowing them to select anybody.
Do you know how many people you're running against?
Yes, quite a few of us. I think I was the last one to announce that I was actually. So, it's quite a few.
Do you think?
I think it's actually 10 total. I think 3 Republicans in the primaries, and I think we have, if I might be the 6th one, so it might be 11. So I might be the 6th person on the ticket for the Democratic Party.
So what that means is, like what I said earlier at the beginning of the show, is that you have to vote the entire ticket. You have to read. You need to come prepared. Have your little cheat sheet or whatever, who you voting for, whatever. Be prepared, be organized, and vote.
Yes. Right. And vote CedricHerring.com. That's that platform. Vote
CedricHerring.com. Okay. I'll put that in the chat for you, because for some reason, all of Clay and Greer's chat information went into my private chat. And I don't know why that happened. CedricHerring.com.
Vote CedricHerring.com.
Or Wake County Sheriff. I'll do that for you. Okay. All right. Well, I have enjoyed our conversation. And I have enjoyed this show, and I hope that you will like, share. When this is over, you'll be able to share it everywhere. So that'll help all of us get more educated. Hopefully people got more educated about voting, the different organizations, and about your upcoming election and your campaign, what it's all about. All right.
I'm excited about it.
I am too. I'm so excited for you and your family and everyone. I think it's great to learn. You learn so much, and I like learning. So this is a good thing.
Yes,
good thing. Well, everyone, have a good night. I'll see you next Sunday at 8:00. We're going to be talking about January 6th. That should be interesting. All right. Take care.
Thank you,
Good
Pam.
night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Mm-hmm.